So the committee will come into order, and I am happy that we're here today to have an oversight hearing on the Congressional Research Service, which is one of the most important support services available to Congress. The professional staff of CRS provides objective, authoritative, and confidential research and analysis on a vast array of issues. But, like any agency of its size, CRS faces its share of challenges, and this hearing is intended to have a candid discussion of those challenges so CRS can continue to support the Congress. To operate at its fullest potential, CRS must have an inspired and diverse workforce fostered by an inclusive work environment. Unfortunately, like most agencies, CRS has contended with budgetary constraints at a time of increasing workload. CRS's budget has remained mostly flat or has been decreased substantially in particularly lean years. In fact, CRS's operating budget in 2017 was $5 million less than its budget in 2010. These constraints have resulted in less capacity to serve the Congress. It has resulted in fewer analysts doing more work. This pressure, compounded by our failure to invest meaningfully in personal office and committee budgets, has adversely limited the scope and depth of services available to Congress. These pressures also impact employee morale, which can further negatively impact agency performance. The cycle of asking congressional support staff and our legislative branch agencies to meet more demands with less resources is unsustainable and needs to be changed. Congress depends on the expert services of CRS to perform its constitutional duties. So when service is impacted, the work of the Congress is too. So we owe it not just to CRS to improve it, but to the American people who sent us here to be their voice in Congress. Although the Congressional Research Employees Association represents more than 80% of the CRS workforce, a common refrain is their exclusion from management decisions. By ignoring them and their learned experiences at CRS, management, I believe, is doing a disservice to both itself and its employees. At CRS, the workforce must be involved in the decision-making and the direction setting of the service. The bargaining unit should be consulted when actions are being considered that will directly impact them and their work. Management should listen to the concerns of the employees. Our goal here today is to develop a full picture of the challenges facing CRS and to devise solutions for the future. CRS does not have to face this alone. In fact, it can't. It's incumbent on this committee and this Congress to ensure that CRS and the broader Library of Congress are sufficiently resourced with adequate support and funding. And I'd now like to recognize our ranking member, Mr. Davis, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairperson Lofgren. I'd also like to welcome today's witnesses, Mary Mazanek, Director of CRS, and Susan Thal, who's here today in her capacity as the President of the Congressional Research Employees Association. I look forward to hearing your testimony and having a productive dialogue about the current state of CRS and ways in which improvements can be made. You know, as the chair said, Congress has relied on CRS since the early 1900s as its primary support agency for public policy research and analysis. Daily, and I can tell you this as a 16-year former staffer, I know from working with CRS that you provide members and other staff with authoritative, objective, and timely work products that assist all of us, members and staff included, in doing our jobs. An agency with such an influential and rich history should be the gold standard of research organizations, not just here, but worldwide. However, it's clear to me there are some internal struggles that have had a noticeable impact on the agency. I am not interested in participating in a public dispute today between management and rank-and-file employees. That is not the purpose of a congressional hearing. What I'm interested in doing is having this committee lay out our expectations for a path forward that will drive the necessary institutional changes that are needed in any agency. CRS must improve their processes and mechanisms for establishing the agency's mission and meeting Congress's needs in the 21st century. Strategic workforce planning, workforce training, performance management, recruitment, hiring, and diversity management. Some of the ways in which this can be accomplished, in my opinion, are through surveys and focus groups, both internally and externally, IT analytics, management training and employee development opportunities, demonstrating how training efforts contribute toward improved performance and results. It's a must to have a system in place to continually assess and improve human capital planning and investment and its impact on accomplishing your mission. Transparently align individual performance expectations to identify specific levels of achievement within CRS's mission. We hope you conduct employee exit interviews and track that feedback to identify any trends that could be advantageous or problematic. And we hope we would see a culture that encourages a culture that creates and maintains a positive work environment where employees are valued and can maximize their potential and contributions to CRS and, in turn, the mission of the United States Congress. I intend to focus my questions within these areas and hope to learn more from our witnesses on the current procedures in place at CRS and where there might be room for improvement. Let me be clear. I expect the Congressional Research Service and the Library of Congress to respond to the concerns and recommendations expressed by the committee today. These are not merely suggestions. Congress needs to see action. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, and other members are invited to put opening statements in the record. I would now like to welcome and introduce our witnesses, and thanks to you both for being here. Mary Mazanek has served as director of CRS since 2011. Prior to her appointment as director, Director Mazanek worked at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, where as Deputy Assistant Secretary and Director of the Office of Medicine, Science, and Public Health, and the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. She was a Robert Wood Johnson Health Policy Fellow, serving as a senior advisor to the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, and the Subcommittee on Public Health. Earlier in her career, she served as a senior policy analyst at the Medicare Payment Advisory Commission. She received a Bachelor of Science from the University of Notre Dame, summa cum laude, and a doctorate in medicine from Case Western Reserve University Medical School, and a Juris Doctorate from Case Western Reserve University Law School. We are also joined by Susan Thal, Dr. Susan Thal. Dr. Thal has served as president of the Congressional Research Employees Association, or CREA, since February of 2016. Working at the Congressional Research Service as a specialist in drug safety and effectiveness, her portfolio includes drug development and approval, post-market safety studies and surveillance, drug importation, pharmaceutical promotion to consumers and health professionals, FDA appropriations, and regulatory science. Before joining CRS in 2002, Dr. Thal worked at the Institute of Medicine at the National Academies, the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, the National Center for Health Services Research, now AHRQ, and the Harlem Hospital Prevention of Prematurity Project, and the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation. She earned a PhD in epidemiology from Columbia University and an MS in health policy and management from the Harvard School of Public Health. I would ask unanimous consent that, well, we'll get into that later. I would like to ask the witnesses to try and summarize their written testimony in about 5 minutes. We operate under the 5-minute rule. I think you're familiar with our light system, but when you're close to the end, the little yellow light will shine, and when the red light shines, your 5 minutes are up. We'd ask you to try and summarize. You're both very distinguished individuals. We look forward to hearing from you, and first we turn to you, Dr. Director Mazanek.
Chairperson Lofgren, Ranking Member Davis, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today regarding CRS. CRS appreciates its role as Congress's trusted resource. We strive every day to maintain that trust and uphold our core values of authoritativeness, confidentiality, nonpartisanship, objectivity, and timeliness. In my testimony today, I want to focus on 3 main themes: our commitment to serving all of Congress, workforce initiatives, and our strategic planning efforts and future directions. CRS continues to interact with virtually every committee and member. In fiscal year 2018, CRS provided more than 62,000 custom products and services, authored and maintained approximately 9,000 general distribution products, hosted more than 8,600 congressional participants at our programs, and published nearly 6,000 bill summaries. We continue to support this Congress on a wide range of policy issues, including energy, the environment, science, healthcare, border security, immigration, foreign affairs, and campaign finance. CRS engages with members at the very start of their careers in Congress. In January, in cooperation with this committee, CRS was honored to again host the new member seminar in Williamsburg, Virginia. Next, I want to turn my attention to the CRS workforce. Our most valuable resource is our core of dedicated professionals who work in concert across the organization to carry out our mission. Just like last week, during our annual staff appreciation ceremony, I had the opportunity to acknowledge the outstanding work of my CRS colleagues. I am proud and privileged to lead our team. CRS continues to broaden and strengthen its research and analytical capabilities to ensure that we are able to provide the full breadth of public policy and legal work that Congress demands. CRS, like Congress, is a workplace where every day is different. The fluid nature of our work often requires that staff prepare intricate analyses and also respond to introductory questions which lead to more complex requests. For individuals who enjoy that challenge, CRS is a place where they can grow and thrive. With Congress's generous support in fiscal year 2019, CRS has successfully strengthened coverage in a number of key areas. In the year 2020, the service will continue to bolster its workforce, and even in this tight labor market, CRS continues to attract and retain very high-quality professionals who are drawn to our unique mission to support the Congress. But as Congress evolves, CRS cannot remain static. We must continually evaluate how best to serve the Congress. Accordingly, the service engaged in a strategic planning process with the library. During the process, approximately 130 CRS staff participated in 12 working groups. The resulting CRS directional plan identifies two main goals: enhance service and access for all of Congress, and optimize resources utilization. Nested under these goals are specific objectives and key initiatives that emphasize CRS priorities, such as advancing diversity and inclusion efforts and aligning the CRS work model to meet Congress's needs. An example of a recent key initiative was the public release of non-confidential written products. For the first time in our history, in September of 2018, non-confidential CRS written products were made available to the public. Today, more than 5,500 products are on Congress.gov. We are on track to meet the remaining goals and deadlines by the end of this year. Information technology is a critical tool that CRS uses to create, deliver, and showcase our work. CRS continues to support the library-wide efforts to centralize information technology. We meet regularly with our colleagues in OCIO and are continually identifying means to ensure that this transition period is seamless and that IT issues are addressed promptly. Moreover, CRS, in partnership with OCIO, has launched an initiative to modernize the service's IT systems. The goal of this critical 5-year initiative is to improve efficiency and foster innovation in CRS operations, while continuing to protect the security and the confidentiality of congressional data. CRS is scheduled to test a prototype of a new content management system in this fiscal year. Finally, on behalf of my colleagues at CRS, I would like to express my appreciation to the committee for its continued support. CRS looks forward to the committee's input so that we can continue to be Congress's foremost resource. And I'm happy to respond to your questions.
Thank you very much. Dr. Thal would be happy to hear from you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Lofgren, Ranking Member Davis, the other committee members who are here. It's nice to see so many here, and staff. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Susan Fall, President of the Congressional Research Employees Association, CREA. CREA represents about 500 of the approximately 600 CRS employees. I'm happy to sit beside Dr. Mazanek. She has listened to CREA. CREA's role, though, is not only to be heard. It's sometimes to convince management that there is a problem, that there's a solution, and that working together can help. We don't always agree. In my written testimony, I mentioned 8 such issues, but today I'll focus on 3. The need for a more diverse and inclusive workplace, the need to restore confidence in our promotion and performance appraisal procedures, and the need to fix the morale crisis in one of our 6 research divisions. First, diversity. In 2016, partly because of CRS employee answers to the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, Dr. Mazanek appointed a Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Group. It had managers and non-managers and a CREA representative. The group did its homework. The report laid out a thoughtful plan, but somehow central office staff changed much of the report before submitting it to the director in the group's name. After much back and forth, the full report was issued. But then the report that was posted on the CRS website was missing some of those recommendations. I think there was a communication opportunity that was missed there. Since then, the director has formed 2 other groups that are looking at diversity issues, and we hope that the outcome is different this time. There are so many ideas that we have that could improve diversity and inclusion, perception and reality, but now 3 years after the federal survey, we don't see that CRS has an effective plan or a way to measure real progress. Second, performance appraisals and promotions. Again, here, CREA and management are not quite in sync. CRS has, what we can tell, no clearly stated policy or standards for promotion, and it desperately needs one. CREA has handled performance appraisal cases where there's clearly a disconnect between supervisors and employees about what their expectations are. With access to anonymized data, CREA analysts could examine whether promotions and performance ratings vary by characteristics of the individual or of the immediate supervisor or the division or office. There may be no problem at all, but without our knowing that, suspicion abounds. When employees perceive actions as unfair, management loses some of its moral authority, and that can affect decisions to leave. And such attrition is really costly. It takes time and money to recruit, screen, hire, and train. And that takes time away from our ability to serve Congress. CREA has raised issues about promotion, for example, again and again. And I think there is hope. Last month, Dr. Mazanek told me that CRS management was interested in looking at promotion procedures. So I propose that management involves CREA now. We have experts who advise Congress on these issues. Why not use us to boost the chances that the plan we develop and communicate to supervisors and employees will succeed? Okay, and I'm going to talk really fast. Finally, let's fix the American Law Division. ALD is one of the 6 research divisions within CRS. ALD's work is unique, but so are the number and types of complaints we hear from its staff. Current and former legislative attorneys report a toxic environment. Employees fear speaking up. The numbers tell us that there's a problem. During the last 3 years, attrition in our other 5 research divisions averaged about 7.5% per year. For ALD, it's a little over 19% each year. And new hires haven't yet gained the experience of the kind of work CRS does. At ALD, the number of people who have been here for more than 3.5 years is about 46%. Since the committee announced today's hearing, we've heard from many former ALD employees asking us to urging us to ask the committee for help. So we're asking now, please urge CRS management to meet with CREA, former employees and attorneys in ALD now. Let's explore the reasons for what we're hearing. Let's find solutions, and I think they exist. We have other issues. My written testimony talks about the concern of shifting from experts to generalist staff. We talk about work-life balance and issues of how to help that. And then finally, CREA's concern that management fear of the reaction of some members, of the potential reaction, makes them shy away from controversial but important issues. But it's time for your questions. I'm interested in what you suggest. I look forward to that this is a beginning and working with Dr. Mazanek and her staff, and so that we can turn all of our energy to meeting the important and enormous needs of Congress. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you for this testimony. I would turn now to the ranking member, the gentleman from Illinois, for questions that he may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for having this hearing. It's good to see my colleagues, too. Mr. Aguilar, how's baseball going? Pretty good? All right. I was hoping not to get that answer. I don't want to do a CRS report on the last 6 years in baseball victories at the Congressional baseball game. I'm well aware of the record, unfortunately. Ms. Mazanek, what do you see as the largest challenge for CRS today?
I believe our largest challenge is to make sure that we recruit and retain a diverse workforce with the skills and expertise that we need in order to support you at a very high level.
All right. Ms. Stahl, what do you think the biggest challenge is?
I think we are a great group, and to keep us going and to try to work together to stop these kinds of internal frustrations. There's a lot we can do. I think we need to figure out how to serve, at what level to serve Congress. There's lots of need for short-term things that legislative correspondents and analysts need, and then there's also work that a committee staffer might need to really help developing a project.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought up Congress. How does, Ms. Mazanek, how does CRS capture feedback from members of Congress and their staff?
Thank you. So several years ago, I believe in 2016, the library was directed to do a survey of Congress about the products and services they receive from the library, but especially CRS. We contracted, CRS took the lead on it, we contracted with Gallup, and we got very encouraging, very positive feedback. CRS plans to do another survey this fall to again try to capture in a more formal way feedback. But we get a lot of informal feedback on a day-to-day ongoing basis from your staff and directly from members. I take advantage of when I informally meet with members to try to get their input into how we're doing, what they would like to see from us, and what we could do better.
Okay. What type of IT analytics are used to capture information about your work products?
So we have a customer management system where we basically put in requests, specific requests that come from members and their staff. It is a data set that we look at to try to spot trends. Other things that we look at.
So you're talking about trends just on the
number of requests that
number
are
of requests. What, is there a trend on the type of requests being made, the issue areas? Are you guys using any of the IT data analytic tools like Google has to look at how many people have actually opened the reports that you've put out there?
Yes, we do that too. We do that in cooperation with OCIO. We capture how many times someone goes to a certain page, how many times a certain report has been viewed. We're doing that both on the office CRS.gov, but we're also tracking Congress.gov, where our reports are being pushed out to the public.
Okay. So I mean, you've shown us that you get feedback from members of Congress, our offices, our staffs, our committees. You use IT analytics. How do you capture input from your employees and that may influence your strategic plan?
So the strategic planning process that we embarked on, well, it was probably a couple years ago now, was very inclusive. And we did that by design, and it was, I believe, a significant change from past practice. We invited staff to sign up for work groups, and we also involved staff in a variety of venues, including focus groups, town halls. I myself conduct all-hands meetings. Divisions, the various divisions and offices will also have staff meetings. I have an open-door policy. If someone wants to come in directly to me to sit down with me and pitch an idea or to express a concern. And so I think we do this on a regular basis. There's always going to be room for improvement, though.
I don't have much time left, Ms. Stahl. You agree?
In large part, yes. I think the planning process this year did involve staff at many different levels. What we don't, once all that information comes in, we're often not included in the discussions, though, and I think we can do that better. Staff meetings are good. The problem is people don't always want to speak up, and we have to find a way to have that be a safe environment where if someone wants to speak about a supervisor, that they're not immediately labeled a whiner. Some people might be whiners, but some people might have legitimate concerns.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. I want to thank both Director Mazanik and Dr. Thal for being with us today and sharing your insight. I've always thought that the Congressional Research Service is an enormous asset to our work in Congress and an international marvel when you think about it, the idea that you have one independent, objective research authority for members of Congress from whatever political persuasion, and that they get us information and facts, and we can rely on them. And so I want to thank you both for the work that you're doing. We're grateful for your expertise. Let me start with you, Madam Director. Can you explain what is the peer review process at the Congressional Research Service, and are the CRS products ever peer reviewed by external entities?
So we have a multi-tiered review process. It begins with peer review, but then there's also section review, division review, and then there's final review in the front office. The review process is designed to ensure that the product is consistent with our core values of objectivity, authoritativeness, nonpartisanship, et cetera. I think for the most part, we do little external peer review. There may be certain parts of a report that we ask an outside expert to look at to make sure we get it right. I feel, and having written policy reports, that the peer review process is an asset. It helps us make sure that we have a comprehensive product that is of most help for Congress, and I always welcomed it. I think part of the challenge is we're working on very tight deadlines sometimes, and it takes time to move a product through the process and actually have a back and forth on the content.
Dr. Thal, let me come to you. A lot of my constituents work at the Congressional Research Service because I represent Maryland's 8th Congressional District, which includes Montgomery, Frederick, and Carroll County. And so I definitely know a number of people who come down to work here for CRS. You mentioned in your testimony the need to create a fairer, more hospitable work environment. That's something that's obviously of concern to me since I've got constituents who work there. What are the obstacles to creating such a work environment, and what are the specific problems that you're identifying?
Let me preface by saying I love working at CRS. I was excited to come here. I've been here 16 years, and there's most that's wonderful. We're talking about things on the edge, and we're trying to fix them now or address them now before they spin out. We want people to be treated, to be respected for our work and for who we are. And that means if we're respected to advise Congress on earth-changing issues, why are we not respected on things like how we organize our day? Or there's some flexibilities that Congress, the library, and CRS grants us, but different supervisors apply those differently. These are minor things compared to other things that your committee deals with, but it's the everyday pressure that then affects how we might do our work.
And are you in a process where you feel that you can be heard and there's a collaborative, conciliatory framework for dealing with these?
We're doing better. I think we've made some progress with that. The one thing that I don't think we have figured out how to do yet is just as not all employees are ACE perfect, not all supervisors are perfect. I mean, you've all seen that in your lives. And our impression is if we want to bring that up, the reaction is that that's not a valid
Okay,
concern.
but this is normal workplace
But
stuff.
absolutely, yes.
So, and you're not dealing with problems of harassment or discrimination that are not being effectively addressed?
There are ways that we can address that through the library process. Now, partly because of your committee, we can also go to, they have new initials now, Office of Congressional Workforce Rights. There are kinks along the way, but basically the process is there.
And then finally, Ms. Masnick, did you want to respond to any of that?
I certainly am willing to open a discussion about how we can communicate better. It seems like there's a communication issue raised by a number of concerns that Dr. Thal raised, and how to capture input and feedback. And I meet with Dr. Thal on a regular basis. My management team meets with other representatives in Korea on a regular basis. Maybe some of their concerns can be brought up in those venues. We also have other avenues where individuals can bring a concern directly to me anonymously through a director's comment box. But if there are other ways that we can improve communication, I'm open to discuss it.
Terrific. Thank you. Yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here today. Director, what's the mission of CRS?
The mission of CRS is to provide information, research, and analysis on all legislative issues in front of Congress to aid them in carrying out their constitutional duties.
Oh, thank you. Do you agree with that, Dr. Thal?
I'm sorry, I got a note
Just
and didn't look.
The mission of CRS?
To serve Congress, to help you make better decisions so that it's better for everybody.
Thank you.
That's
I appreciate that because that's the way I feel, and
Yeah.
I've had some concerns about other aspects of the library getting away from the idea that they're predominantly library that exists for Congress. So it's refreshing to hear that. And what you do is extremely important. As I'm sure many of my colleagues here use CRS extensively, we do, and it's extremely important that not that CRS be bipartisan, but it be unbiased.
Yeah.
not taking one side or the other. And when this hearing was we announced, I met with all of our legislative staff, and I just asked them, what is your opinion of the service that we're getting from CRS? And it was for the most part very positive. The only negative feedback we got was on certain occasions in certain departments, it may not be unbiased. There's some opinion put in, not in the reports, but in the conversations that they have. But we can work through that. So the process, Director, for getting a report approved, is that process transparent to the employees? Do they know how that process works?
Absolutely. They're actively engaged with the individuals reviewing their report, and there should be a dialogue or a back and forth. If you ask a peer to review your work and they take the time to do it and they submit comments, I would hope that was the start of a conversation.
Okay.
That's the way it should work.
Yeah. Dr. Thal, do you agree that it's transparent?
The process is transparent. Some people handle it better than others.
Okay.
I mean, as in anywhere. I think part of the problem is the expectation of what a CRS report is has sort of varied over time, and there's a little confusion about that. I agree that there should not be personal opinions in a report, and probably not in conversation either. But I think that it serves Congress best if we, in addition to giving you a description of this is what's happened before, this is what this bill would do, this is what this other bill would do, if we could add an analysis to give it a framework of how it fits into what we've seen, those of us who've been hired as experts in our field. And I think partly because of the volume of reports and requests, we don't have time for that, and partly because that we seem to be moving away from that.
Okay, thank you. Director, how do you guys advertise for positions? If you need to fill a position, where do you go and seek?
So our positions are posted in USA Jobs, but we also send the descriptions or the announcements rather broadly. If we're seeking a particular set of skills, we may approach professional organizations, societies, academic institutions. We have sent announcements over here to offices over here. And that's one of the ways we're trying to ensure that we have a diverse applicant pool.
You still are guys. I see. No, it's, when it comes to the hiring process, what is the process for actually hiring someone? You identify someone who has a skill set. How do you transition that person from being an applicant to actually being an employee? Who makes that decision?
So the library follows a merit selection process, and we follow that process. After we post a job and the position closes, the applications are reviewed to make sure that they meet the minimal requirements outlaid in the position description. Then those candidates are invited in for a structured interview where all applicants are asked the same questions. There may be a second, after the leading candidates are determined, there's usually one hiring manager. There's a panel, a hiring panel, but one of the individuals on the panel is the hiring manager. We try to ensure that the members on the panel also are diverse. Then an individual may be brought back to clarify responses or to meet other people that they'll be working with. And then a decision is made, and we work through the library's HR office. They extend the offer. After the offer is accepted, the person is scheduled to come on board. They are put through a library orientation, and then CRS conducts its own orientation. A lot of individuals who join CRS, especially analysts, they are assigned a mentor, and it's a lot of mentorship on the job, learning by doing. I actually want to talk to a lot of the new people that we brought on board recently to ensure that the onboarding process is meeting their needs, and I have that planned to meet with some of the new hires in the last 2 years. But that pretty much is how we bring people on board.
Okay, thank you. I see my time's expired, so I'll yield back the remaining time I don't have.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you both for being here. I know that you mentioned, Director, the CRS is the foremost resource for members of Congress, and I can tell you by traveling around, we're kind of the envy of a number of other Democratic bodies as well because of how well performing and organized that is. But I also know that the people are at the heart of that, and so that's why I wanted to follow up with a few questions around the people themselves. And one of the things that I'm hearing is that there are a number of policies, perhaps in more divisions than not, among relationships that are strained for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit more and what you see. Clearly, communication is often at the heart of that, but are there some policies that are different and that people interpret them differently, whether it's leave policies or checking in, making sure that they have to sign something if they're leaving? What is it that you think may be at the heart of some of those concerns?
I think you've already identified it. I don't think there are different policies. I think that it's the way the policies are implemented. And several years ago, I set up a policy working group that is run out of my counselor's office. I tasked them to review all the policies in the service and to clarify and update the policies. And that was an attempt to have a more uniform application of the policy. If there is still a need for clarification, my counselor's office will talk to managers, talk to staff to further clarify the policies.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Thal, how would you respond?
Right. I think that at the top level, there are some good flexibilities that CRS policies cover. Dr. Mazanik has said that part of her management style is to let the managers make their own decisions, which in general I support because different offices have different flows and need different things. But sometimes within the same office, there are different decisions made for different people, and that creates stress. I mean, that's not unlike other workforces, but you're asking us about ours.
And I think I was hearing that you're both interested in taking a look at that and seeing how can we improve that, and I appreciate that. And the other issue really is a little bit on. I think my colleague has raised it somewhat. I might do it a little bit differently. It's always been a policy of nonpartisanship, but now I think there seems to be a concern. Maybe this is more in the law division, of one of neutrality. That providing facts obviously is critically important to CRS, but that there are some issues that are not even raised that should be. Would you like to respond to that?
May I go first? Okay. She's my boss.
I know. I looked at
Okay.
whoever is comfortable.
But we coordinated our
Thank you.
colleagues.
I'm
Fine.
Now I've forgotten the question. I'm sorry.
Well, it's sort of this nonpartisanship versus
Yes,
neutrality.
I think that's
how
part
do you
of-
see that?
Thank you. Some issues they're so critical that there are facts, but there's also talking about the ramifications of those. And sometimes that discussion can be unbiased and nonpartisan, but it's not always neutral in that an expert will have experience and a concept to put in. It's important that they identify that, and I think the review process helps a lot. But sometimes we're shying away from several years ago. This had nothing to do with the current administration. I was counseled I could write a descriptive paper on something, but not to get into the possible other ways to organize the program that they were talking about. And I was told, don't do that,
Yeah.
it's too controversial.
Does that affect morale?
And yeah, well,
Yeah.
it makes me
Dr.
feel,
Mason?
you hired me as for my
Sure.
thinking.
I'm sorry, my time is limited. I just wanted to
So
be
I
sure
have a
that we had a
different
chance.
point of view. It's really not neutrality. What we strive for is objectivity. It's one of our core values. I would also assert, and maybe we have to reinforce this in communication, that analysts are supposed to be analytical. That not only should they present the facts, but they should also be analytical. Where we draw the line is we don't make recommendations, we don't advocate. We inform the debate, but we're not here to tell you what the best policy option is. And we do tackle controversial subjects. I would point you to reports and some of the topics that we have reports on. And we also do that with our targeted research requests, which are confidential. And we generate a lot of confidential memos that are on controversial issues.
Thank you very much. I know my time is.
Thank you. The gentlelady from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here today. Let me just ask you, what is your policy, if any, on diversity, and talk to me about the diversity of your staff?
So diversity is diversity in the workforce is a top priority of mine. I think it's important, it's critical to bring all perspectives to the issues that you're grappling with. I can tell you, I can just give you a little bit of data because I've looked at it recently. We looked at basically 3 years, 2009, 2013, and 2018. This is self-reported data. 28% of the staff identified themselves as being part of a minority group. However, over the course of that time period, there have been some shifting among the various minority categories, and we have lost diversity at the most senior grades in the service. This is a high priority. We are trying to identify specific actions that we can do and put in place to make sure that our applicant pools are diverse. As Susan mentioned,
do you have, excuse me, just one, forgive
Yep.
me. Do you have any people of color in your senior leadership?
Yes, if it depends on how you define color. If you say, if it's African American, no, we lost 2 African American senior level leaders in my tenure at CRS. They left to pursue preferred opportunities. The one told me she wasn't even looking. Her dream job dropped out of the sky, and she wanted to take the opportunity.
So there are no people of color in upper management. I would just suggest to you that if you're having problems finding them, we know people everywhere. So, and we can make recommendations to you.
Okay.
Not that I have any right now, I have no idea, but I think that we should not have an agency or a department as involved in what we do every day as you are that has no person of color in your leadership.
We've started to look at some of the numbers, and numbers don't tell the whole story, because I know there are efforts to recruit minorities, but when we looked at the percentage of African Americans, I don't have the numbers in my head, but African Americans among the baby boomer group in the library, in CRS, that was a higher percentage of minorities in that group, my group, than in the millennials, who are the more recent hires. And that is really concerning, because we're talking about diversity and inclusion, but it's not showing. So there's work.
Okay, so tell me then how many people of color you have amongst your ranks of analysts and attorneys.
I would have to look that up and tell you.
I can get back to you with those numbers and percentages.
Let me just say that the Speaker of the House has made diversity one of her main issues. And I would certainly hope that every single person that has a role to play in hiring or promoting or including people of color would make sure that that is done on a consistent basis. It is very difficult for me to understand as many young lawyers and people that are around this hill. There are not people that you can find. They call my office looking for jobs every day. So there's something that's not quite right. But please let me know what your progress is on that. I will be waiting to hear how things progress.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Thal, you brought up concerns with the American Law Division and its high turnover rate. Can you talk a little bit about that division? Why is it different? And in your opinion, why do we have a higher turnover rate in that area?
That's a really good question, and I would like to work towards finding that. Some of that is normal. It's people retire. Some of it is people who may be retirement age who are fed up or who are feeling unappreciated and they leave. So that looks like a normal retirement when we feel that it's not. What's really concerning now is that new people coming in are picking up on the tensions, even if they're not affected by it, and are looking for other jobs. And this could be such a great place to work. I'm not part of that division. We have trouble. People in that division are very wary about speaking to the union because they've gotten the message that they're not supposed to do that. And I'm not saying that anyone has said that, but it's passed on from person to person, and we have to somehow break that. And I think the committee, by asking these questions, might be helping start that conversation.
Is your leadership team within the union, do you have someone from that division, a shop steward, or how does it function?
There are, we have governors and stewards in almost all of the divisions. It turns over sometimes. There's no one from the American Law Division. I think they see that as a career stopper. That may not be true, but I think they're right.
Sure.
And so we get people, meeting us for coffee off-site or stopping by my office after hours. And then, it's really disturbing, and it's time to address it.
From your position, how can we address, what's something we can do to address the turnover rate, in that? I hear what you're saying. It's a lot of different factors, including kind of a snowball effect of folks leaving, as well as kind of general attrition that you indicated. What else can we do to kind of blunt that turnover?
I think that's a role of management. I think what people have reported to me is that there are real problems in the management and lower level, next level supervisors in that division. And it seems from the outside, it looks like Dr. Mazanek is not engaging with that, not causing it, but not dealing with it. And I think we need to, this is not, as you said, Representative Davis, this is not a time to talk about personnel issues, but it's time to talk about how we're going to talk about it. And I think
Sure.
if you asked us to do that, maybe that would help.
Sure. Director?
I am aware of the concerns about the American Law Division. The American Law Division did have a bump up in attrition rates. I think it was concurrent with a management initiative to rebalance portfolios over there. It was also at a time when our staff was decreasing in numbers. Unequivocally, I will tell you that the American Law Division produces exceptional work that is held in very high regard, but it is a very difficult job. They're the smallest division, and they have 37 legislative attorneys. Not only do they do the legal analysis on the legal infrastructure under policy issues, but they also tackle the purely legal issues. I meet regularly with the management in ALD. I have brought the concerns to them. We have strategized as to how we can address the concerns. Part of the problem is trying to pin down the root cause, though. The head of the American Law Division has taken efforts to improve communications both within the divisions and with the other divisions because there is cross-collaboration across the service.
If I could interrupt and ask one last question, building off of what my colleague from Ohio mentioned, Director, if I define person of color as African American, Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islander, that would be my definition. So let me get to the question. How many direct reports do you have?
I think I have about 12 direct reports. All the assistants and associate directors are direct reports to me, as is the deputy of CRS.
Okay, and out of those 12, how many people of color is I defined?
So you brought in the definition
I did.
Of color. So I'm doing a quick count in my head. One.
Okay.
One.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and thanks to all the members and both witnesses. I think this has been an important hearing for a couple of reasons. First, the attendance here shows that we have a very strong interest in what's going on at CRS. Two, although there are different viewpoints being presented by Kriya and Dr. Mazanek, it's very clear that you're both committed to CRS and have an interest in making this work well. And that actually is, if you want to take a look at hope for the future, that is the bottom line that gives me hope for the future. In terms of follow-up, obviously, we don't want to have a public, it would not even be functional to have a public discussion of personnel items or anything of that nature. But I do think that it sounds like there are opportunities for improvement in certain areas. The American Law Division is something I've run into in one of my other committee assignments, the Judiciary Committee, and I will say the members of the division have performed admirably and provided a great service to the Congress as they, no one is questioning their motives, they're just the analysts. But it's not the easiest thing in the world to manage a bunch of lawyers or to manage a bunch of PhDs for that matter either. I mean, these are highly talented people, have their own views on how things should work, and it's a very different environment than certain other management challenges. So I'm wondering if at some future date, I don't want to set a timeline, we could have an update on progress being made in some of these divisions. I will say the idea that of the 12 direct reports to you, only one is a person of color is of concern. We are strengthened as an organization if we have diverse viewpoints. All of us are products of our experience. And we know that academic analysis has shown that we will actually get better work product if we have different viewpoints approaching that work product. So let's take that very seriously. I just want to ask a question, because I get being the chair of this committee is an interesting experience because you get feedback from members in a very different way. The CRS provides experts for committees in analyzing very serious problems that are very complicated. But sometimes members call over for something that really isn't that complicated. And I'll give you an example from my own office recently. There are a whole bunch of Medicare for All bills that have been introduced, and they're all different. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if CRS could just do a quick and dirty, not what how are they gonna change society, not what they cost, just, okay, here's 5 bills, here's how they differ. And after substantial back and forth, CRS said they couldn't do that for me, which is fine. I mean, Vox News did it, and I posted Vox News instead. Actually, I could have had an intern provide the analysis in the time it took in the back and forth between my office and CRS, because some of these questions are simple. They're not really complex, sophisticated analysis that's being asked for by members. And I do get complaints, not from other members, that they can't get like the dumb stuff done. And I'm wondering if there's a way to manage the office so that, not to the detriment of the more sophisticated analysis, which is the guts of your work, but the simple things could be answered for members. That's question number one you don't have to answer now. I think to some extent, I remember being on the Hill as a staffer in the 70s, right after CRS was established. And the role played then was very different than today, because we have Google now. We don't need to call CRS for some of these answers. And I think that has probably changed the whole nature of what you do, and yet the authoritative nature of what CRS is still might call on the Congress to ask you, because you're known to be objective, you know, what are the facts on this simple question that we don't want to quote Google, we want to quote CRS. Director Mesnick, can you address that at all?
Well, you've identified one of the challenges that we have as a service, that not only are we trying to balance the highly analytical work, we are also responding to a lot of basic informational questions. What we try to do when we get a request is call back the requester and really identify what do they need from us, so that we try to meet your needs on your timeline. I was aware of the request that your office put in. I'm sorry that we didn't get you what you needed. The analyst did talk to your staffer.
Multiple times.
Multiple times to try to clarify.
No, and I've got the email. I don't want to revisit that because Vox News did what we did, and we posted their report, you know, online, and it's just a quick and dirty difference. What are the differences in the bills? I don't mean to revisit that, but the question is, are you set up to deal with members who have really simple questions that they want CRS to answer?
So we do have a cadre of research librarians that provide a lot of responses for purely informational requests. They're embedded with the analysts, and they work side by side. We have tried to diversify our staffing structure. We introduced a position of a research assistant, which will hopefully also be able to work with the senior analyst to maybe unload the senior analyst by taking on some of the requests. Obviously, they would have to be reviewed by the senior analyst. So we have tried different things.
Right. Let me just ask this in closing the hearing, and we'll keep the record open for 5 legislative days for members who wish to submit additional questions, or for the minority that wishes to submit additional views. But when a toxic work environment develops any place, it's really hard to break that up, because sometimes it feeds on itself. It's almost independent. And it sounds like, if Dr. Thal, that your concern is that may have developed in some of these divisions. It's very difficult to unwind that, but it sounds like CREA is willing to be an ally in unwinding that, yes, which is a very positive thing. So I'm, given that we have challenges, the management challenge of managing people who are as educated and expert as you are, it's difficult in an environment where resources have not grown and the challenges have. It's all a big challenge, and it's not going to be any easier if people don't feel good about the workplace. So I'm thankful that you're willing to work together. I'm looking forward at sometime in the near future where we can touch base with you as a committee and kind of get an informal assessment of the growth that you've made. And with that, I would thank you both for your important testimony, and note that, it's not every day that CRS makes front page news. So with that, we will close this hearing and adjourn. Thanks very much.